Well, hey, Tapestry Church, and I want you to know that your church staff and leadership are praying for you. We want to minister to you in this time in any way that we can. So if you have a need that we could help meet, please let us know. Just shoot us an email, give us a phone call, shoot us a text. We want to be there for you and be at your disposal as your church staff. But one of the ways I want to share with you is just kind of giving you a quick thought from what God's been teaching me over the past week or so from His Word and from the context that we're walking through and the unique context that my wife and I, Natalie, bringing our first baby into the world in the midst of all this. So I want to share with you from John chapter 16. And I'm going to read verses 21 and 22. But to set up the context, Jesus is teaching His disciples and telling them about the reality that He's going to go away for a while. And in the midst of Him going away for a while, there's going to be real sorrow. There's going to be suffering. And if you read the New Testament, Jesus is clear. Hey, if the people of the world hated me, they're going to hate you. If I suffered, you're going to suffer. And then you look at the letters of the New Testament, you see the suffering of the saints of Jesus, and then you look at church history. Suffering is a part of the Christian life, but Christians don't suffer like everybody else. And that's part of what Jesus is teaching in John 16, that, hey, there's sorrow for a moment, but there's joy coming when I return. There's joy coming because of my promises and because of my word. And in the midst of that teaching in John chapter 16, Jesus uses the illustration of childbirth. And if you know, my wife and Natalie, we've just recently had our first child. And so this passage just kind of leapt off the page to me like it never has before. So let me share with you. It's, again, John 16. I'm going to read verse 21 and 22. This is what Jesus says. When a woman's giving birth, she has sorrow because her hour has come. But when she has delivered the baby, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world. So also you will have sorrow now, but I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. When I thought about that passage, I thought about the real sorrow and pain that my wife went through in labor, and I thought about standing there beside her, and obviously she had the harder part with the pain, she had the harder part with the suffering, but it was tough on me too to watch her walk through that. But it was a different kind of unique sorrow and suffering because you know what's coming at the end. You know there's a finish line, and at that finish line there's going to be new life. And so obviously we walk through that, and then the baby's born, and it's just this beautiful. I'm just bawling, crying tears. He's so beautiful. He's so big. Look at this guy. And there's just sorrow turning into joy so quickly. And I think that there's a reason Jesus points to this picture of pain and childbirth, sorrow, and yet joy coming so immediately. And I thought about really two takeaways from these couple of verses in John 16. And the first one is this: it would be foolish of us in this moment, in this season, in the world around us, to pretend like sorrow and suffering isn't real. It would have been ludicrous for me to look at my wife while she was in labor, while she was feeling the pain, and say to her, it's going to be all right, bud. Everything will be all right. Pat her on the back. You'll be fine. Was that true? Maybe. We felt like it was going to be true. But in that moment, to diminish the suffering, pain, and sorrow that she was walking through would have been silly and insensitive of me. In the same way, there's sometimes a tendency for Christians to pretend like suffering's not real and to pretend like the Christian life is just rainbows and butterflies. And like I said, I think if we look at the Bible and we look at the New Testament, that it's just not biblical for us to believe that sorrow, pain, and suffering aren't real and aren't parts of the Christian life. And so we don't need to diminish those who are hurting around us. We don't need to diminish the hurt that we're all facing. The reality is this: in some way, what's going on in the world around us with the spread of COVID-19, in some way, everybody's feeling it. Everybody's feeling it. Some are feeling it financially. Some are feeling the distancing and the anxiety and depression. Some are feeling just general anxiety about the future, what's going to come. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people are far from their families. And so everybody is walking through this with sorrow, pain, and suffering. And as Christians, now's not the time for us to say that suffering is not real, that life is rainbows and butterflies, that there's nothing hard that we're going to walk through. That would be dishonest, and it wouldn't be a helpful message. But at the same time, what Jesus says to His disciples is a message for us today, that Christians don't suffer. We don't walk through sorrow, and we don't walk through pain the same way as those who have no hope. And the reason is we have the promises of Jesus. So my first takeaway is, hey, let's not diminish the real suffering that people are walking through. My second takeaway is this: Let's not forget the promises of Jesus in the midst of pain, sorrow, and suffering. Let's not forget that Jesus told his disciples, and he's made this promise to all of us, I'm coming again. And when I come again, I'm going to set everything wrong. Everything that's wrong, I'm going to set right. When I come again, disease is finished. And when I come again, death is finished. And when I come again, distancing from the people you love is finished. When I come again, I will be your God, you will be my people, and we're going to be together. He's going to wipe away every tear. That promise of new life is what Christians say. That's our hope. Our hope in life and death is that we belong to Jesus and that he is going to make everything right. Again, not to diminish the suffering and pain that's real in the moment, but to look at it like Natalie and I in that labor and delivery room. Yes, it's real. She's walking through it, but there's a finish line. There's new life. Jesus points to that in John 16. He says, hey, that sorrow goes away because of the life that comes, and what's replaced is joy. And Jesus says to his disciples, hey, when I return, you're going to have joy, and no one can take that from you. So let me encourage you, believers, Tapestry Church, in this, that though it's real, though we're feeling it, we have the promises of Jesus to rest on. Let's encourage one another in those promises. Let's preach the gospel to ourselves and remind ourselves that God has a plan and a purpose, even when we can't see it. And let's preach that gospel to the lost people around us right now. I would encourage you to continue to pray for our governing authorities, pray for those medical professionals who are on the front lines fighting against this thing. Pray for your church leaders and those who are making decisions about how we minister well. Just pray for our church family, that God will hold us together in a unique way in this time. Thank you so much, Tapestry Church.